Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Thank you. It's true. And these are the best and the finest. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East. But we don't know.
The turn of a phrase flipped America upside down, folks. Welcome back to Training Tuesday here. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and RX Spaces simulcast. Well, let me quote something here that you just heard again. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best, President Trump said. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people, close quote. Well, that was the very beginning in 2015 when an American decided to run for president, sparked the great media manipulation of his words in order to destroy him, and it continues to this day. Well, my guest today writes in his new book, quote, "It was those words that would set a new trend of acceptable misrepresentation in the media. Specifically, the manipulation of one single word would open the door to a narrative that took on a life of its own. The entire narrative that Donald Trump is a racist was fueled by the changing of this one word," close quote. Well, the media misrepresentation normalized by this one choice of a word has continued to grow and is currently causing great damage to the America that we all know and love. Our society is greatly divided because of these falsehoods, and at times it seems we may not be able to overcome the division. But a new book, as I mentioned, by today's guest, former Mississippi 4th District congressional candidate, Air Force combat camera veteran, author, and political pundit, E. Brian Rose, called Cloning Donald Trump, How the Media Manufactured a Monster, provides us a roadmap for citizens to use and reveal these propaganda tactics for what they are: lies that destroy. Brian, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Colonel, thanks for having me. I appreciate you reading that one quote. I think that was the most popular quote of the book, or most powerful quote of the book, actually. It set the tone, and it really set the tone in America, where it is absolutely acceptable to misrepresent Donald Trump. And you didn't mention what the one word is, though.
Well, I wanted to wait to let you do that because I was fascinated when I started reading the book, and I have to be transparent here, Brian. I wrote a foreword for Brian's book, for this book in particular, partly because when you asked me to do it, I started reading the book, and I'm like, wow, I didn't realize it was just on this one word. Tell the audience what the word was and how and why they did this.
So the quote was, "They're bringing their drugs." And you have to break it down. Now, realize there are teams of people that the left puts out there to cherry pick things that the opposition says and try to find a way of kind of steering in on one thing that they can say, hey, this is what he said, even if it's not. And that's what they did. They're bringing their drugs. So if you break it down, the first word's a contraction. They are bringing their drugs. Possessive, T-H-E-I-R. The next line, they're bringing their crime. They are bringing their, possessive, T-H-E-R, crime. And then he says the third one, they're rapists. Not they are rapists. They're, possessive, T-H-E-I-R. But they quoted it as they are rapists, meaning all Mexicans are rapists. And that is certainly not what Donald Trump said. And that sparked off an explosion in the media and with the left saying, oh, he's a racist. He called them all rapists. When he did not say that. He said they're bringing their criminals. They're bringing their drugs. They're bringing their rapists. And that's exactly what they did. And the status the crime reports show they absolutely did bring crime. They absolutely did bring drugs, and they brought rapists. Not only did they bring them, but the journey up from the coyotes that would take them up from South America, those people are rapists as well. Women were being raped by astronomical numbers. And it was Telemundo that actually put out these numbers that Donald Trump got them from, which is a Latin American network.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, obviously the branding that they're doing on this man and us, the people that support him, these days, it hasn't always been this way. They worked on him first, but now they're down to the supporters, obviously.
Well, they've got it down to science, no doubt.
Yeah. But one of the things that really puzzles me is after Barack Obama's election, that was sold as America has gone beyond this, racist history of the 50s and 60s and 40s and Jim Crow law. Sure. We're beyond it now. Even though I didn't vote for the guy, I was like, well, if nothing else happens from this presidency, that's a good thing that's acknowledged.
It was a glass ceiling that was broken. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm glad that you brought up Obama.
What puzzles me is they want to turn back the clock. Why did they want to do that?
Well, they want to do it because it's easy. It's easy to get the low-lying fruit by saying, oh, the right is nothing but racist. The right is led by the orange man, the bad man, the racist man. And that all stemmed from the manipulation of that one word. But I'm glad you brought Obama up. Obama is a polished politician. He has been probably since he was 10 years old. He's been practicing for the job. And he was a very eloquent speaker, especially when reading from a teleprompter. But when he wasn't reading from a teleprompter, you notice that Barack Obama spoke very slowly, almost robotically. And there was a reason that he did that. Sometimes you'd be watching him on TV and saying, now, I know this is an intelligent man. Why is he talking like that? Because he's thinking ahead at what they're going to write. And he wants to make sure that it is properly translated. Now enter Donald Trump into the scene. He is not a polished politician. He is not a guy that spent his entire life practicing for this role. He's a New Yorker that talks like this. He says bullshit. He says swear words. He just speaks off the cuff. He doesn't think about how it's going to sound. He's the kind of guy that talks, and once you get the gist, he might even stop in mid-sentence when everybody just understands what he's saying and moves on to the next thing, like we all do in normal conversation. But Barack Obama was very rehearsed. The media has just zoned in on that, and they use it as a weapon against him. And it didn't end at the day that he came down the escalator. They stepped it up after Charlottesville. You remember this? This is a lie that has been told over and over again when he said Donald Trump, the media said Donald Trump called neo-Nazis very fine people. He said there were very fine people on both sides. And then he specifically said, I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white supremacists. They should be condemned totally. They leave that part out. And even in the debates, the 2020 debates against Joe Biden said the lie again. And Donald Trump is in the background saying, finish the statement. Well, that's what he meant. I'm not talking about. And here's how good the media is about it. You can take some brainwashed leftist who believes every single thing that they hear on TV and play the tape and say, see, he didn't call them very fine people. He said they should be condemned. And that person will look you in the face with a straight face and say, you must have manipulated this. They truly believe that the tape is a lie. It's astonishing.
Yeah.
The Democrats are very, very good at this.
Yeah, you tell an anecdote in the book about the stop at the local gas station that you used down here.
Oh, there's a lot of those, yes.
And talk to some folks there. Talk about those interchanges. You kind of touched on it there a little bit ago with how convinced they are. But these real, these are real people.
The video. I actually showed the video to a woman. I was wearing a veteran's hat. I wasn't wearing anything Trump memorabilia or anything like that. And she said, how could you vote for this guy? And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, obviously you're a Trump supporter. I said, why? Because I have a veteran's hat on? And she said, yeah. So I guess she assumes that all veterans are Republicans and voting for Donald Trump, which is not the case. But I said, right. I am a Trump supporter, but that's not what this hat stands for at all. This hat is much bigger than Donald Trump. And she said, how can you vote for someone who dodged the draft? And I said, well, what do you mean he dodged the draft? She said, he had 4 deferments for education, and then he had a medical deferment. And I said, so who are you voting for? And she said, I'm voting for Joe Biden. And I said, Joe Biden had 4 deferments from Vietnam for educational and 1 for medical. And his medical, get this, was for asthma shortly after he was a high school star football player. She said, you're a liar. And I said, you know what? Pick up your phone, Google it. She Googles it and literally stormed out of the place. She was in line buying gummy bears, and she left holding her gummy bears. I don't even think she realized she was shoplifting at that point. She was so, I don't know if it was anger that she was being shown the truth, or if it was just her brain exploding because everything she wants to believe isn't true.
Absolutely, man. It's an amazing story. It is absolutely astonishing. It's amazing that people actually believe this stuff. And the machine, as you call it, the machine is that good. Well, we have a live audience, and I let them ask a question every quarter hour if we get a hand up. And we have a hand up over there. Brian, my host, is Shell in our X space. Go ahead, Shell. I'll see the hand up there. Who is that?
That is Sofa King, sir.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Colonel. Hello, Brian. Thank you for showing. In your book, I have not read it yet. I'm just being introduced to you. Do you also talk about the flip side of the coin where they do the exact same thing in opposite for their candidate? Whereas, they turn the phrase to make it horrible for Trump, but then they take horrible things that Biden has actually said and make it appealing.
Absolutely. And thanks for that question. I actually have, the title of the book is Cloning Donald Trump. And there is a chapter in the book called The Cloning of Joe Biden, where they actually did the exact opposite to him, where they took really sketchy things and a bad history and turned it into the greatest thing ever. And a great example of that is the NBC Sports interview that was happening with Brandon, who was the NASCAR driver, who had just won, I think it was Daytona for the first time, young guy. And the crowd in the background is chanting F Joe Biden. And what does the NBC reporter say? Brandon, they love you. They're chanting, let's go, Brandon. And the look on Brandon's face was just like, I don't think that's what they're saying, but he just rolled with it. And that's where the term let's go, Brandon came from, where Republicans and people on the right and Trump supporters say, let's go, Brandon, in exchange for F Joe Biden. So yes, they absolutely have done that with him. And when they couldn't rebrand him anymore because of his missteps, they put a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses on him and called him Dark Brandon. They leaned into it. They steered into the skid. So absolutely, they are experts at marketing, 100%.
And that's why you ought to get this book, folks. So we got to take our first commercial break, Brian. When we come back, we'll see the full clip of the Fine People hoax, the full clip of Donald Trump and what he actually said, and then we can talk about that. But I want to take a moment to touch on the Tim Walz nomination or announcement for VP nominee by Kamala Harris here in this next segment too, and get your take on what we've learned so far. We'll be right back with Brian Rose, author. And has written a great book, folks. You need to go get it. Cloning Donald Trump and how they made a monster out of this guy by just changing one word. And we're on Worldview Tube and X Spaces simulcast. We'll be right back.
People in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. No, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits, and with the helmets, and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're talking with E. Brian Rose, who's from South Mississippi, the same congressional district I'm from. He actually ran for that congressional seat. So he and I both have run for office, for federal offices, and we're used to politics and the hammering of political opponents by media on one side or the other, and we're used to the mainstream media being in the tank for the leftists and the government at this point in our lives. But what surprised me, Brian, about that clip was I watched it live, and I was shocked at the treatment of the media about that phrase, fine people, because when you see the whole thing, it's very clear what Mr. Trump was talking about. And he even clearly called those people out and then called the people on the other side out. He's talking about Antifa, the black hoodie folks with masks and baseball bats. Those are the Antifa people in the other crowd. And I was talking to a person that was on the ground there that day, and that's what he was telling me. What he was seeing was these neo-Nazi types and these Antifa types on opposing sides. So I was just absolutely shocked to see this hoax come out and that it be so effective. How did they do that?
I think you nailed it when you said, if you see the video, and that's the problem. They didn't see the full video. The media purposely cut out certain parts of it. And I can tell you this, if Donald Trump was not a public figure, if he was not the president of the United States, if he was just a normal person, an everyday private citizen, and the media did this to them, they would have a multi-million-dollar suit against them for defamation of character. Similar to what, you remember the kid with the red hat on that they said started the fight in Washington? But it was actually the Native American that approached him, and he just stood there kind of shocked. And he got millions of dollars from CNN and other networks because they painted him in false light. And that's exactly what they're doing to Donald Trump. But unfortunately, you can't really sue when you are a politician, when you are the bar for defamation is much, much higher. And I think that that's a law that needs to be changed that would kind of rein in the media from lies. But I don't think that that's going to happen. The very fine people thing, that was just the cusp of, they were testing us. They were testing it out. Hey, can we manipulate things? Can we tell a lie enough times? Will the people believe it? And they did. Look at the tax cuts. Come on, man. They crucified Donald Trump. For what? For cutting taxes of the middle class. And if you go through the Biden IRS data, you'll see that the middle class got the highest amount of tax cuts during the 2017 tax cuts, Trump tax cuts, than any of the other brackets. In fact, they got an average, I think it was 24 to 26%, whereas the upper high end, the 1%ers only got about an 8% cut. But Nancy Pelosi said this is Armageddon for the middle class. She said that they've been thrown under the bus. And it simply wasn't true. And one of my favorite newspaper articles of all time actually came from the New York Times. Of all papers, you know, I'm not a fan of the New York Times, but I'm a fan of this article. They came up with an article around 2019, and the name of the article was, the title was, Face It, You Probably Got a Tax Cut. And within the body of this article, they talked about how most Americans, and they did a poll, most Americans did get a tax cut, including the middle class. However, Colonel, they don't believe it. Their paychecks went up, but they don't believe that they got a tax cut. That's the power and the manipulation that the media has on people. And Nancy Pelosi was very, very upfront about it when she once explained this to the press. She called it the wrap-up smear. We say something to the press then merchandises it. Well, Nancy Pelosi said that it's Armageddon, so they kept repeating it. Armageddon, Armageddon, Armageddon. And that gives it kind of a flavor of trueness, of truthfulness, because the media is now repeating what they said. We saw it again with Adam Schiff during one of the bogus impeachments where when he read, I'm talking about the phone call transcript between Zelensky and Donald Trump, where Adam Schiff had a piece of paper like this and read as if he was reading the transcript, the actual transcript, but it was fake. And I said, I will withhold all the money and all the weapons until you put Joe Biden, I mean, whatever it was that he said, he read it as if it were real, and it wasn't real. He actually got sanctioned in Congress for that. But the people, the American people that don't pay attention to all the nuances and all the nitty gritty just heard that sound clip over and over and over again. So they think that Donald Trump actually committed some sort of crime when it was a made up, bogus transcript that he read to the American people. He should be in jail for that. But instead, he's possibly going to be our next senator. It's insane.
California. So it's combined, you know, that he reads something on television and then the print media people in that room go write their stories about what he said. And they leave out the part that it's made up because they don't really know. They don't ask him any questions. Right. So then the print media rolls out and it just keeps building and building on itself. That's kind of what happened with the Russia hoax too, wasn't it?
I think that the media will ask questions that they want the answers to. The leftist media will ask questions that they want the answer to. And when they get an answer that they don't like, they'll just cherry pick it. They'll just print certain quotes from that statement so that they get the message that they want out there. Going back to Charlottesville, very fine people on both sides. Joe Biden repeated that lie over and over up until about a month and a half ago. He was still repeating
Yeah.
that lie. It's absolutely insane. Now, of course, we don't have Joe anymore. We've got Kamala taking his place, and she's going down the exact same path. She's actually taking it a step up a notch, actually, talking about unemployment, talking about stock market crashes. I mean, we had one of the largest stock market crashes in the history of America that happened yesterday during a time that Bidenomics is being touted as the savior to America. And when I say savior, I'm not using that word lightly. They literally asked Joe Biden what he wanted to be remembered for, and he said saving America's economy. So they're touting Bidenomics as the savior of America. And they're saying, when you point out, hey, the stock market took a dive yesterday, in the last 3 days, Americans lost $2 trillion in wealth. What do you have to say about that? And they say, well, I want to remind you that Donald Trump had the largest stock market drop in one day in the history of the United States. Then they talk about the unemployment when he left office. Then they talk about black unemployment, Hispanic unemployment when he left office. These things prior to a certain event that happened were at record-breaking low levels. Unemployment was down. Black unemployment was down. People were making more money than ever in the history of America. And then COVID-19 happened. And the leftists locked us down for longer than they should have, if they should have in the first place, which a lot of us argue. And they pretend that that never happened. So what they did was they dug this hole of unemployment, and then when they lifted the sanctions on America, basically, and that's what I call them, the lockdowns were sanctions on us, all Biden had to do was just stand back. A monkey could have been president, anybody could have been president, and that hole would have been filled because the businesses opened up and the jobs opened up. And he says, in my first 100 days, I created 4 million new jobs. No, you didn't. 4 million people went back to work in your first 100 days. So they're revisionists in history. They're revisionists. Yesterday's history they'll revise through the media. They are marketing geniuses, and you have to give them credit for it. And where the Republican Party fails is they don't know how to market. Not that I encourage this type of marketing, but I think that what the Republicans need to do is expose this type of marketing. And I'd like to see more of that. And that's why I wrote this book, because it's a side-by-side example of here's reality and here's what the media wrote about that reality. And they don't coincide. And when you see it, and then you say, hey, I don't know if this guy's telling the truth. He's just some dumb Trump supporter. Google it. Fact check me. Every single sentence in this book can be fact checked. The media has been lying to you, and they continue to lie to you to this very day.
And that's what I like about the book, Brian. Tell people how they can get the book nowadays.
So
where can they buy it?
This is an actual interesting story and a very opportunistic thing for your audience. This book was just taken off of Amazon 3 days ago. We started a massive push to promote it, and Amazon said that they got a number of complaints from people saying that it was false information. I gave the challenge. You need to fact check every single bit of this, and I guarantee you it's not. And I think we might have a lawsuit here if you can't prove what you're saying. Well, we're in that appeals process, but right now I want everybody to read this book, so I'm giving it away for free. This is the book. It's called Cloning Donald Trump. And if you go to cloningdonaldtrump.com, that's cloningdonaldtrump.com, you can download it for absolutely free. There's a little box at the bottom that says, how much do you want to pay? If you want to pay something, you can put a number in there. But if you want to get it for free, you can just type in 0. And no harm, no foul, you'll be able to download the ebook version and read it today. And here's what I want you to do with it. Don't just read it and shake your head in agreement with all these things. Show parts of it to your liberal friends that have been brainwashed. You know, they say if a lie is repeated enough times over, 50% of the population will believe it. And I think that explains liberalism in America. They're lied to, and they're the side of the population that believes the lies. Everybody else is like, wait, let me check that. And I'm not saying everybody on the right fact checks everything. They should, but enough of us do to not believe the lie. So download the book for free today. All the friends of the Colonel will get it for free at cloningdonaldtrump.com.
cloningdonaldtrump.com. We got to take our second break, but when we come back, I've got the clip of Nancy Pelosi talking about the wrap-up smear and how it works. Is she admitting guilt? Of course she is, because she's a dirty, low-down, rotten politician. We'll be right back with E. Brian Rose, author of Cloning Donald Trump, and get it at cloningdonaldtrump.com. We'll be right back on Worldview Tube and X Spaces simulcast.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Melissa and I have been taking Bella Grace, this powerful elixir, since last fall, 2023. The results have been amazing. My hands would crack and bleed, deep cuts and cracks every winter for years. No matter what we did, we couldn't get them to stop cracking and bleeding. This year, I took Bella Grace, no cracking, no bleeding. My acid reflux, gone. Haven't had to take a Pepsid. My hair growth, the last 2 times I had my hair cut, the lady had to use thinning shears on my hair. That's amazing. We've also received incredible feedback from you, our listening audience, and the impact it's had for you. This is loaded with astaxanthin. That's a powerful antioxidant. Collagen, but top grade collagen. Studies show 95% of it is being absorbed in the body because of the way they develop it. Then we have something called cat's claw. That's an anti-inflammatory from a vine in Peru. It's the bark, and it's an anti-inflammatory. There are about 80 clinical trials on Bella Grace. Please get a subscription now and save. MelissaHouseBG.com.
We call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, you call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and if they see it's reported in the press that this, and this, so they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show on Worldview Tube and X Spaces simulcast. It's Training Tuesday. And man, are we learning a lot today from our guest today. It's author E. Brian Rose, who's also an Air Force combat camera veteran and former congressional candidate here in the Mississippi 4th Congressional District, and a good friend of mine that I've met since we moved over here, and I love this guy. And Brian, that was Nancy validating what you just said about the wrap-up smear. They really do that, and we've seen it because we've run for office, and they use the press reports that write what they've smeared you with against you as, hey, see here, it's valid, it's valid.
I love
so
the tail end of it. The tail end of it when she says, it's a tactic. Yeah, it's a tactic, and it's a tactic that has worked wonders for her and her cronies. And I'll tell you what, one of their other tactics is parroting. They say a word and then they repeat it enough times to where the people on X or the people on Facebook or the people on social media sites start parroting that word. We saw it when Vance was J.D. Vance was announced as the vice presidential candidate. They called him weird. Over the next week or so, we saw the word weird appear thousands of times in the press, because Kamala called her weird. And press releases started coming out, weird, this is weird, this is weird. And people started parroting it. Now every time somebody is promoting Kamala on X, they say it's weird. They did the same thing prior to that during the debates when Donald Trump said black jobs. What is a black job? And people started posting, pictures. Black Americans were, doctors. I'm enjoying my black job today. Well, that's not what that was meant to be. Black jobs, you have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that are out there touting their black unemployment numbers. How do you record black unemployment numbers if you can't report what jobs are held by black Americans? It's a ridiculous argument that they made. And it actually goes back to 2008. There was a report that came out from the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights. They assembled a panel of experts, and the title of this report, you can Google it right now, is The Impact of Illegal Immigration on the Wages and Employment Opportunities of Black Workers. Well, what's a black worker? A worker who is black. What is a black job? A job that is held by a black person. But the best part about this is Donald Trump was absolutely right. And what he was referring to was this report and subsequent reports that came out after this that said that black workers were disproportionately impacted by illegal immigrants taking jobs. That is a fact. So when Donald Trump says that black jobs are being affected by illegal immigration, he's not lying. He's not being racist. He's absolutely telling you the truth. And the whole black job thing, what is a black job? Coming from the same people that can't tell us what a woman is. It's insane.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And they just used it again at the Black American Journalist Conference that Mr. Trump had the courage to show up in person for. The very first question resulted in the black jobs, trying to hang that albatross around him again and again. He's absolutely right. You know, look, if it's good enough for Barack Obama to talk about it, it's good enough for Donald Trump and the rest of us to be concerned that when any group of people is being disproportionately impacted in a negative way, especially about their employment by illegal aliens that are being allowed to flood through this border, that's an important policy point to be making, because it's why I oppose Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, man, because that is wrong. It's driving their wages down, too. It's driving everybody's wages down. But Black Americans have had a particularly difficult time getting wages that are equivalent to everybody else's, no matter what their color is in this country. And we need to continue to work to fix it. Donald Trump has fixed it at one point in his first term. So I'm glad you brought that up. We had a hand up over in the audience. Let's take that question real quick, Shell. Before I ask Brian about what he thinks of Army veteran Tim Walz's selection as the potential VP nominee for the Democrats.
Yes, sir. We have Tom Slocum, sir.
Hey, Colonel. I just had a quick question. It's slightly off topic, but it's about the president. And we just heard that a Pakistani man was arrested last month. This was just released in Brooklyn. With alleged ties to Iran on an attempted assassination plot to murder the president. And there had been a lot of rumblings about Iran being involved, and now we've got someone that's been arrested. Just want to know your thoughts on this.
Well, you shouldn't be surprised. We've had factual reports, and I'll just put my 2 cents in first, Brian. We've had factual reports over and over again of over 150 people on the terrorist watch list being allowed into this country. And just yesterday, it was confirmed that 99 of those were released back into the population without any monitoring whatsoever. Go ahead, Brian, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the Iran plot to kill President Trump was mainstream news. We knew about it. In fact, when the Secret Service director was being grilled by both sides in House hearings, which was one of the greatest hearings of all time. You had just about everybody in that hearing all on the same page, all grilling this person. She said one thing that I found very interesting. It was asked, and I think it was AOC that actually asked about the Iranian plot to kill President Trump. And she said, we were aware of it, and we were very prepared for it. They were prepared for a state-sponsored assassination, yet a 20-year-old greasy-haired geek was able to get to him. It's completely insane, and there needs to be a little bit more investigation going on. I'm more concerned about the United States government failing to protect a presidential candidate than I am about a Pakistani that is on the terrorist watch list and possibly tied to an assassination attempt. Because what's more startling, that somebody lets something slip through the cracks, or that there's people that want to do harm to our presidential candidates?
Yeah, and I would just add that it's very unfortunate that the institutions that we used to trust. Look, I served in the U.S. Armed Forces for over 30 years. You served for many years, and we continue to serve in various ways in our communities and alongside government officials. So it's not like we have an innate distrust of the institutions of the United States of America from the local to the federal level, but there is one that's been built over these past decades. And this is another reason why I wanted to get your book on the air to talk about this, because the media and the intelligence services have worked together in concert, hand in hand, to build these false narratives. The January 6th false narrative is a perfect example of the intelligence services and the media and law enforcement working hand in hand, along with people like Nancy Pelosi. Remember, that's why I showed you the wrap-up smear clip from Nancy. And remember, Nancy's daughter led a documentary team of filmers throughout her day on January 6th. What do you think they were doing there, folks? So anyway, I'm very concerned that there may be something that's been going on with the institutions in the United States government that could easily portray an Iranian attempt to assassinate Donald Trump when it's really not that. So I'm very concerned about that. There are many questions.
I'm glad that you brought that up, that our institutions are getting involved. I'm glad you brought that up, because if you go back to the 2020 election, the October surprise, there's always an October surprise. And we know what the October surprise was in the election of 2020. It was Rudy Giuliani coming out with Hunter Biden's laptop. And listen, they made it about Hunter Biden. It wasn't about Hunter Biden. It was about Joe Biden's involvement in Hunter Biden's dealings with foreign adversaries, with China, with Ukraine, with shady characters all over the world. So what did they do? The FBI went to the social media sites, particularly Facebook they started with, and said, listen, Zuckerberg, you can't allow this to be shared. Now, what business is it of the FBI to tell Mark Zuckerberg that they can't share this? And I'm no Mark Zuckerberg fan, and if I were in his shoes, I probably would have had a middle finger going up after being told that by the FBI. But there is a lot of talk that the word monopoly was being used in that conversation, and that is something that scares the crap out of somebody like Mark Zuckerberg. For the Department of Justice or the United States government to come after Facebook and charge them with monopoly and split up Facebook into a utility or whatnot. They did the same thing to Jack over at Twitter, and I think Jack was even more willing. And what did these social media sites do? They literally banned you if you shared the New York Post article about the laptop. The secretary at the White House, the press secretary of the White House, her account was banned because she shared a news article from one of the nation's oldest newspapers because they didn't want this information to get out. This was game-changing information. If people knew 10% was going to the big guy and they knew that Joe Biden was the big guy, they might think twice about voting for someone who's been being paid from China. Yeah. They manipulated the election. We had Joe Biden as president as a result.
And the intelligence services were all part of it. A guy named Anthony Blinken organized the 51 former intelligence leaders, known liars, proven liars in testimony before Congress, people like James Clapper, that signed the letter saying, oh, this is Russia, this is Russian disinformation, it has all the signs of it, etc. And that put the lid all the way on to the pot and kept it there just long enough for Joe Biden to get elected. And I think a lot of people have said, more than 60% said they would probably have voted differently had they known the truth about that, instead of the lie that the media and the intelligence services and the government put out.
You still have people on social media that believe that the Hunter Biden laptop was a hoax. You still have people saying these things, despite there was just a criminal court case for Hunter Biden where that laptop was talked about, where it was literally said by the FBI, yes, it's legitimate. Yes, we had it in our possession for 2 years prior to it going public. We knew about it. We knew that it was real. It was his. But you still have people that believe the lie, because here's the thing. You can lie about somebody, you can lie about something, and then you can come back a month later and say, hey, remember when we told you for 6 days straight that this was true? Well, it turns out it wasn't. Let's move on to weather now. 90% of the people hear the lie and believe the lie. 10% of the people hear the apology for the lie. So, you do have infiltration.
The only way you could have an impact on that is if they were held accountable, and none of those people have been held accountable. Blinken is your Secretary of State today, folks. So, we got to take our last break, Brian. When we come back, I want to talk exclusively about veterans and the relationship Donald Trump has with veterans. You write about this in the book, in the framework of two of the great laws that he was able to sign supporting veterans. And I want to talk about that and how the media has portrayed them so that we can fight against it. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show with E. Brian Rose, author of Cloning Donald Trump, and getting the truth out about the media's narrative and its lies and how to fight that.
And for our great veterans, we passed VA accountability and VA choice, and nobody thought it was possible. And we had to get that through Congress. We had accountability, we had choice. We had thousands of people, Henry, thousands and thousands of people in the VA who were sadists and who were thieves and who were bullies, and they were horrible to our vets who weren't in prime time for themselves. If they were, they wouldn't have been harassed like they were harassed. But we had 9,000 people, over 9,000 people. They couldn't get rid because of civil service statutes and requirements. And I got that knocked out in Congress, and they fired about 9,000 savage, horrible people. And then we got choice, where, think of it, you had people waiting in line in the VA for days and weeks and months, sometimes with a very simple problem, simple ailment. And I said, I have an idea, a great idea. I told a group of experts, they were all sitting, about 20 guys, 20 people, and they're sitting in front of me and said, I have a great idea. Why don't we do this? If they can't get good service from the doctors in the VA, and by the way, they're great doctors, what they do is unbelievable. When you see them take a soldier who got just blown to pieces and frankly put them back together brilliantly, it's amazing. Couldn't have been done 5 years ago. But when you see the work they do, but you can't get to the doctors because of the administration and what they're doing. I said, you go out, you get a doctor, get a great doctor, get yourself fixed up, and we pay the bill. And nobody believed I got that through Congress. I got it through Congress, and we're saving thousands and thousands of people. Those two things, choice and accountability, were fantastic achievements. And, we got a 92% approval rating in the VA. Nobody else has ever got more than 50%. People don't know that. So the vets definitely like me, and I like them too.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Training Tuesday, and we're talking about the book by E. Brian Rose down here in South Mississippi called Cloning Donald Trump. And it's the story, and it uses facts and shows these facts side by side of what really happened versus the way the media portrays it or the government portrays it in an attempt to smear Donald Trump and his supporters and everything he does. And I wanted to dedicate this last segment to veterans because there's a lot of stuff that goes around about veterans and Donald Trump that just isn't true. Just isn't true. Like the suckers and losers comments and those kinds of things, absolutely been proven to be not true. Not one witness that would have been around, and plenty of witnesses, more than 40, that have said those things never did happen. And Brian, you write about these two acts that the president was talking about there, and that's a 2024 clip, by the way. So it's part of his campaign this year. The Accountability Act and the Community Choice piece of the act, which is the reason why I submitted myself to the VA medical system, because I can go to an urgent care clinic that's a block and a half from my home here,
That's
and
right.
I don't have to do anything with the government in order to do it. So that has been a blessing, but the media has tried to twist both of
Yes.
these, and take away these big wins for veterans that, if not for Donald Trump, wouldn't have happened. How did they do that, and why?
So this stems back to 2014. There was a news article that came out. I can't remember the news outlet that broke the story, but it was a VA clinic in Arizona, I believe, or New Mexico that was falling apart. People were on waiting lists, and they were literally dying on these waiting lists. And they had secret lists that weren't available to some of the people in management. And word got out, and immediately Washington started going, oh my gosh, this is a PR disaster. We've got to help the veterans. So they created what's called a Band-Aid. The Obama administration worked with bipartisan members of Congress to create a choice act, basically. And it said if you are over 29 days waiting to see a doctor or a specialist, you now have what's called community care options available to you, that you can go outside of the VA to the private community sector and get a doctor. Now, this was a 2-year Band-Aid. People like Bernie Sanders were absolutely adamantly against this being permanent because they want to use the VA as a model that, hey, the government can run health care, and if the VA is their model for that and the VA is failing, then so goes the notion that the government can run health care for all Americans. So they created this 2-year Band-Aid, did not make it permanent. At the end of 2 years, there were still massive waiting lists. So if you lived more than 40 miles away from a VA clinic, or if you were on a 29-day or longer waiting period, you got to go into the community for your care. Well, it was set to expire when Donald Trump became president, and he extended it. But before even that expiration happened, he went to Congress and said, we've got to make this permanent. This is not just a Band-Aid. We've got to make this permanent. We've got to make it better. In fact, let's not burden the VA with like little cuts and scrapes and little runny noses and things like that. Let's allow veterans to go to any urgent care, basically, in the United States. And I mean, I live in the small town of Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and we have about 5 or 6 urgent care places here that I can now go to. I went just last week with a sinus infection. I didn't have to go to the VA. I didn't have to go to the emergency room or set an appointment with the VA. I just walked into urgent care, which is next door to the grocery store, got my meds. Meds are covered. Everything's covered under the Mission Act. It made this permanent and gave a lot more things, including real choice, that was not included in the Band-Aid that came from the Obama administration. When I say real choice, if you don't like your doctor, you can say, I want to go to the community instead. So if you don't like the care that you're getting, you have that choice to go to the community. But what did the media do? Colonel, they branded him a liar. They said he stole valor from Obama. This is Obama's fix. This is Obama's bill. And they repeated it over and over again. I think CNN reported on their website Obama tells the lie that he signed the Mission Act 152 times. He did sign the Mission Act. That happened in 2018 when he was president of the United States. Yet they said he told the lie 152 times. Obama did not create this. This was created by Donald Trump. And like he said, he also passed legislation to, I don't know if you ever worked for the government as a civilian, but we used to joke when I worked at a NASA Space Center that it would take an act of Congress to fire somebody. Because it would.
Yeah.
Because there's so many layers of appeals and things like that that managers are afraid to get rid of abusive or neglectful workers, that everybody, even the bad ones, just can remain on the payroll. So what did Donald Trump do? He proved the theory right. Couldn't get rid of 9,000 people that were just bad apples. He had to have an act of Congress to fire these people, and he got that act of Congress and fired them. And of course, the left spun that as well. Veterans all over the country are screaming and cheering, saying, hey, they made the process easier. They made veterans benefits easier. They made everything easier for us. But the media says he fired them to replace them with Trump cronies. I'm sorry, but if a Trump crony is somebody that wants to help veterans, then I'm all for Trump cronies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask you about Tim Walz. You know, the news is broken that Harris has picked this guy, Tim Walz, who spent 24 years in the Army and the Army National Guard. They eventually rose to be, at least from a temporary perspective, command sergeant major of his battalion, but then suddenly retired about a month after his battalion got a warning order to deploy to Iraq in 2005. You know, that news is being put out there, and it's factually correct. I've checked the facts on it. New York Post has published an article about it. And really, you know, I've been an NCO and an officer and a commander. My last deployment ended in mid-2005, about a month after this guy chooses to retire and ditch his unit, which eventually did deploy to Iraq. And I've got to find out what the numbers are, and I'm going to publish an article on this when I do. But I think they took significant numbers of killed in action in that combat deployment that Walz decided to ditch, go ahead and retire instead and leave his people. And he's the command sergeant major, Brian. I mean, he's the guy that those men and women are going to be following in combat the most, in the right hand of the battalion commander. I just think it's atrocious. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that before we close this out.
Well, I think, you know, when they say when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, you know, he proved that he wasn't that. When the going got tough for him, you know, he went the other direction. Hey, I want to go into politics, and you know, that's when he began his political career, and of course ended up as governor of Minnesota. And we saw how effective he was as governor of Minnesota when the place was burning down. The National Guard, which he was a member of for 2 decades, he delayed. I mean, the buildings were literally burning in his state, and he delayed the deployment of the National Guard, saying the paperwork wasn't correct. Then his daughter leaked out all of the plans that the National Guard, when they finally got called up, were going to do. So people knew exactly where the National Guard was going to be. They knew the timelines. And how did his daughter get this information to leak it out on social media that got shared millions of times by, nonetheless, the people that were burning the place down? So there's a shady history there, both of a little cowardice behavior and then also opportunistic behavior. This is there's a lot of unpacking to do with this guy over the next few weeks, and I know they like to call J.D. Vance weird, but I think there's a lot worse words for her pick for VP.
Yeah, I think the simple difference between Walz and Vance is Walz ran away from the sound of the guns, and JD actually volunteered after 9/11 and ran to the sound of the guns.
That's right.
What
JD Vance's story is the American dream. He grew up with dirt floors. He grew up with a mother that was not mentally there for him, and he joins the military, joined the Marines, uses the GI Bill to become a lawyer, starts investing. Yep. He did all this on his own, became a multimillionaire, and people say, oh, he's the elitist rich person. Well, no, you know what? His book became a movie that is like one of the top 10 movies on Netflix right now, and you can literally see that he grew up from nothing. He is the epitome of the American dream, yet they'll still call him, well, he's just weird. You know, he did all this. He's weird. Well,
Yeah,
if
the
I could be
strange
that
thing
weird,
is,
I'll take it.
everything they believe in is weird. All the wokeism, transgender ideology, critical race theory, and everything. Well, Brian, thank you so much. The book is at cloningdonaldtrump.com. Go get it. Give it to your liberal friends. Hold that cover up there real quick. E. Brian Rose is the author. Hey, throw him a donation. You don't have to. He's giving them away, but throw him a donation. Amazon did take the book off their marketplace. I checked into that before I came on the air. Thank you so much, Brian. We will have you on again soon. Yes, sir. And tomorrow, folks, is Whistleblower Wednesday. I've got a former U.S. Secret Service member here to talk about a little bit about what Brian and I were talking about, the assassination attempt on Donald J. Trump on July 13th and all that goes along with it tomorrow here on World View Tube and our X Spaces simulcast.